hey, you need to make sure that you're on point, right? That you're taking care of your and that you're getting better as a leader and as a human, etc. Because I think one of the biggest determining factors as to whether or not hires work out. What is happening, beautiful people? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Build Your Gympire podcast. This is your spot for great advice on growing your gym, growing your fitness business in ways that you, your team, your community, the people you serve, and not least importantly, your bank account are going to feel absolutely awesome about. Today, we're doing the first episode of what is likely to be an ongoing series called People Problems. And Mark's kind of going to kick us off with some recent lessons. He's hired a ton of people, had some issues where he had to let some folks go. But you know who's going to be better at telling the story than I am? Probably the person that it happened to. So, Mark, kick us off.
Well, yeah, I think broadly, anytime you have people problems, as we're calling it, and you grow and you scale, like it's inevitable. You're in business long enough, it's inevitable. You're working with teams, it's going to happen, right? So I think it's very important to have us as leaders be dialed in, and I think, which what I mean by dialed in is not only ourselves mentally, but also our skill set as leader. If you lead one person, if you have a staff of one person, you're a leader to that person. So I think you really have to be sharp with this. And that's something that, quite frankly, we open businesses, we don't think too much about it. We go, oh, I can lead people, I can communicate really well. And then all of a sudden you got people and I don't understand the problem. It's them, it's not me. And I think looking in the mirror and really, really assessing yourself as a leader and as an individual is super important. And knowing those strengths, knowing those weaknesses, but really those blind spots too. And something we never stop and think about doing as we're growing and scaling, because that's fun, right? And business is crazy and we want to keep growing. And so we need some help. If I only had somebody, and then guess what? Then you hire somebody, and then you're like, oh, if I only had somebody that gets it, that understands it. And you go down the rabbit hole on that really quick. And I'm not immune to that. And those thoughts, everything I just said, not immune to it. But hopefully over the years now, I'm getting a little bit better and getting a lot better, actually, the more people that you come in contact with. So again, we've grown pretty quickly over the last 12 years, but especially the last couple of years here when you we just opened our fourth facility, hiring a lot of people, staff of over 30. I think there's 34 people under our roof right now. Or I should say
Sounds
roofs.
terrible. That sounds terrible.
Roofs. It's a lot. So there's a lot of moving parts. And quite frankly, too, it's like it's not all sunshine. We have a great staff, great team, great leadership. Always can get better, of course, and we're learning from mistakes and miscues. That again, a lot of that is on us for sure. But the point being, the bigger you get, like you're gonna have these are inevitable. So these are like every week or definitely every month type things where you want to make sure your people are on track, and if they're not, how do we coach them up or create a different solution or have a different plan for that person. So we hired a lot of people quickly. I shouldn't say quickly like it was careless. Quickly is different than careless, right? We had a lot of people quickly with a good plan, what we thought was good roles and good onboarding and all that stuff as well. And then all of a sudden, you say you do everything perfectly, and then all of a sudden it's just not a fit, right? Because you can talk about hiring, onboarding as much as you want, and we probably will on this podcast in depth many different times. We'll definitely do that because it's a huge need for businesses and gym owners and to create great teams. But say you did everything perfectly in all those areas. At the end of the day, like there's still not one hiring process where you understand everybody, and they're going to be that way all the time. People do change. Things do factor into certain things. I don't think people change that much, but how could you really understand them? Your business will definitely change, and can they adapt and change with it? So that's a one giant preface to just say, hey, not everything's going to go according to plan. Then what do you do, and how do you react, and how do you react swiftly? And my lesson is when we've all done this, if Jim want to listen to this too. Okay, we're growing, and this is my problem as well. You're growing fast, you're scaling. You want to think about the fun stuff. You want to think about the stuff that you enjoy. And then all of a sudden, a team member is just not quite getting it, and for whatever reason, again, you practice extreme ownership. It's my fault. I'll set them up for success. You do that. Okay. A month goes by. Okay. It's still not clicking, still not working. Oh, maybe it's the clarity on his role. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And we explore all those options, right? And all of a sudden it's still not working out. Then like, what do you do? And I've been guilty of letting that person stay on the team for far too long just because I didn't want to hadn't really have the energy or didn't want to spend the energy to deal with the quote unquote issue. Right. And so that is kind of Where now it's, if we check all those boxes, we practice extreme ownership, and there's still not a fit, and there's not a growth plan for, not only necessarily a growth plan for them. For us, there's always kind of a growth plan because we're always growing. If their plans change, personally changes, they have stuff happen, and they're just not the same person producing at the same level, then something's got to happen. And my advice is to simply act. It's going to cost you a lot more if you don't act rather than acting swiftly. Um, Again, paid onboard periods, whether it's starting salaries or whatever it is, the straight up time and man hours it takes to onboard people, the materials that we give them, everything is so valuable. And it's like, well, I don't want to cut this person. We just invested in so much into them. It's like, well, if they stay, you're going to pay a lot more, and it's going to show up in ways that you can't even measure. And that is a costly mistake. So broadly, that's my advice. Act swiftly rather than delaying.
I like it. I think you hit on some things that need to be rehashed. It's almost like I want to make sure, I shouldn't say you glanced over it, but I think it'd be something that would be easy to sort of overlook if you're the gym owner listener, listening to this podcast. Is like one of the first things you mentioned was the idea like, hey, you need to make sure that you're on point, right? That you're taking care of your and that you're getting better as a leader and as a human, et cetera. Because I think one of the biggest determining factors as to whether or not hires work out, right, across the board is who you are as a leader. I think that has a bigger impact. Like before you say, oh, there's no one wants to work, there's no good help these days, there's no good trainers in my market, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone here's lazy, all those things. You better check the box that like you're doing the you need to do, first. I want to make sure that doesn't get glanced over. The other thing, I think we talked about this in Charleston, Mark, right? Is like, when's the best time? God forbid you get cancer. Well, when's the best time to figure it out and take action on it? Probably as early as humanly possible, right? So if you check the boxes and you've given that person the chance to succeed, you've let them know. It's not like you're firing them as a surprise, right? You're giving them the tools to succeed. You're having conversations. You're trying to coach them up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you figure out it's not working out. Well, it's probably time, right? It's probably time to make a move. I make that mistake. But I tell my wife my biggest weakness as as a entrepreneur is communication. That's been sort of a recurring thing for me. I'm very like high D on the disc profile. My tendency is I think it was a Dave Ramsey disc joke. He says like for D's, it's like, your wife says, oh, you never tell me you love me anymore. I say, well, like I told you on your wedding day, on our wedding day, I'll let you know if it changes. Right. And so communication is kind of one of my bigger weaknesses. She says, no, your biggest weakness isn't communication. It's that you keep that you need to fire. You keep those people on too long, which has been true in the gyms. It's been true in this business, right? I shouldn't say in this business, but it's been true in our agency. And, it's like you let those cancers grow. And the unfortunate thing about cancer is cancer can spread. That's not a very nice thing.
It's a totally,
in your business.
Totally different topic for that. That's an episode in itself. Here's realization I made myself, because I am somebody that practices extreme ownership to a fault, right? And I had to really mature as not just a leader, but a business owner. And I think this is what happens when the saying comes, it's just business. Hey, is this business? So if you get big enough or you do this long enough, you're going to have a situation where maybe you did make a mistake. Maybe it wasn't as clear. Maybe it didn't spoon feed them exactly what they needed. And at the end of the day, it's just like, or the business change, the strategy changes. And I don't want to say like, the people that are great, you're going to stick and move with. The people that are just like, okay, they could say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. And there's going to come a time where it's like, you're right, we didn't. But however, this is still the course of action we're taking. We're sorry. We got this. They're going to do. And I would not be able to do that, 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's like the business, I don't want to do it personally, but professionally, the business needs it. And so you got to be able to make the call, and I'm not saying be totally unfair to people, but I'm just saying like, you got to put what the business needs, what the overall team needs, in place to do that. And sometimes some people just aren't a fit, or I always still say it too. They had an opportunity. Do we give them opportunity to stick and move? Is there a lateral move we can put them in? Like we never want to just because, like I said before, we invest a ton of them. We like to think we're pretty good at hiring. Like people mean well, and is there another place? And again, if they're just kind of, I would say mediocre in some areas, then yeah, you got to move on and make the hard decision.
Like it, Connor. What you got?
I mean, I think there's a trend with everything that we're all saying is that it so much of it is dependent on you. You know, Mark talks about extreme ownership, but like you really have to look kind of internally to see what type of development plan that you had in place. A lot of it falls back on your lack of preparation, on your lack of onboarding, on your lack of training, on your lack of training them for the role and position, not training exercise wise, your lack of managing, your lack of holding accountable. But when all of those things in place are in place, Mark is absolutely right. Like so much that you can look at in terms of numbers for retention and all that stuff. If you do not have the right people in the right seats on the bus, like it's really difficult to hit those numbers that you're trying to scale, to hit those numbers of growth and all that stuff. It becomes really difficult. And you know, in a previous episode, I talked about dichotomy of leadership, and you know, there's such a dichotomy of holding someone accountable for how long you're going to do it versus, hey, we tried in so many different ways, but this is just not a good fit. And I think as a leader and as you evolve, you have to make those decisions. And I'll talk about it. You know, there's probably a lot of gym owners listening right now that have one location. And it is such a different animal as you get more spread out to multiple locations. Mark and I, when we first started, and GRs, you as well, like, you know, your first couple employees, it was so quote unquote easy. And, you know, a lot of those people are probably still on your team because you were right there with them. You know, you were the one on the training floor with them. You were showing them what you're looking at, what to see, how to do certain things. Like you were the immediate person that was handing it off to them. So you were showing them how you do it, how it needs to be done and all that stuff. And that went really, really well. But like, as your business evolves, all of that needs to evolve as well. So as you get out to multiple locations, it's like, how are you training and onboarding them to put them in a really good position to continue to keep your product and customer experience at a certain level? And that's what we're seeing as we continue to scale, just to have the proper training in place and then manage them to the expectation that you put out. That really needs to go deep. As you get wider and wider, you really need to front load the process of the onboarding and training of new employees really upfront and go really deep with it, because as you get wide, it gets way more difficult. So as we kind of always talk about, take the time as the leader to really plan that out so that you can avoid these really tough conversations and situations where you get to a point when you have to let someone go. It sucks. And you put a lot of time and money into that training and getting them into position, and you have all of the hope in the world that every single employee that you have hired is going to be with you for the long haul and be with you to grow and mature and evolve with your business. But at the end of the day, it's a complete fallacy that everyone's gonna be with you the whole time, and the length of your business. So when it comes to that, it sucks, but you have to make that decision for your business. Like it comes down to capacity. Like I fired myself. I did all of our marketing, but at some point I was dropping the ball because of a certain, like, I did not have the capacity. So I fired myself from marketing and we put someone in there. Like, you have to make decisions as a business owner for the health of your business and put it first.
Good thoughts.
You've heard about
thoughts,
you know,
Chance.
what got you here won't get you there. It's who
Yeah.
got you here won't get you there.
Mark,
Sometimes too.
apparently, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but apparently I said a quote on one of our previous podcasts, and I did not give credit where credit is due, and the credit goes to Mark. one thing that has always stuck out in my head is, and this is how we know we got a good group of guys right here, good group, good minds, good heads, is that Mark told me what got you to $1 million business will not get you to a $2 million business. And dude, that is gold right there. What got you to 5 employees is probably not going to get you to 10 employees or anything like that. You know, like the processes that you have in place right now, like as you grow and expand, like you have to refine them and build for your current and future structure. I think that's a really, really important concept, that if you can get under wraps right now with one facility, with the hopes of growing to 5, 10, or whatever locations, you'll be way ahead of the game. Mark, you're smart, dude. No matter how, you're way smarter than you look. Way smarter than you look.
Hey man, I'm glad you remember that, because that's great. It's really, I think it's accurate, you know. But
Yeah.
I forgot I said that, so appreciate you giving props, and it's a nice lesson for sure. And to speak to that too, it's as owners, like we talked about, like the best ability in business is adaptability, right? Like, oh, we can adapt, we can change, we can stick and move. And I think the successful ones can, for sure. As you grow and scale though, and especially with leaders, like I credit our leaders a ton for this, because they will adapt and grow and scale. And so and that's allowed them to rise up into leadership roles as well. So if I go back to, hey, how am I living? How am I leading? They're watching me. How's my mentorship? Well, are they sticking? Are my leaders that I'm elevating sticking around? They're going to mirror you when they're on their own. So what example are you setting? And so for me, I always wanted to set the example of that. Hey, we're going to adapt. Change is the only constant in life. It's always going to happen. Business is a living, breathing organism. It's an ecosystem. One thing happens here, something else is going to change. And get out of that fixed kind of mindset. Get out of the comfortability of routine. Like this is what we're constantly going to be dealing with. And they've all through the years, and let's say that like a lot of years, they've been able to roll with that, and now they just kind of roll with it, especially when they're dealing with issues at the site level and little things that don't get to me anymore. I'm really proud of how they've been able to adapt. But it's kind of like, as a leader, what's your mantra? What's the stuff you want to be passing on? Because eventually it's not just about developing a number 2 or number 3 person. If you're really going to grow and scale, like you need to have multiple leaders not under your roof, like Connor mentioned, and then we're going to see how you do. So and that's just again, maybe that's not for everybody and everyone's goal, but if it is under one roof, then great. You probably create a little more freedom for yourself, but the theory and the application is pretty much the same. You got to kind of mirror that first, and hopefully pass it on to the people you're mentoring.
Yeah, and to go off of that, another really good book that I read was a book called 10x is easy. Is it 10 times is easier
10x,
than
10x is easier
10x.
than 2x.
And is that Dan Sullivan? Right?
Yep.
Yeah. He talked about these 10x jumps that you make, like these transformative jumps that you make. It's almost like you have to become a different person. You have to become a different leader. Because what got you to, like, you could go 2x, like you can open up another space and you could basically run back and forth and handle everything. But that would not work if you had 10, right? Yeah. So you have to start laying the groundwork to become different and change as a leader, so that your business can change and evolve and take these big transformative jumps.
Good stuff, guys. Good book rec. Love that one.
Yeah,
Dan Sullivan.
Put that one right in there. We're gonna create like some sort of rec book club.
Probably should.
That's what I was looking
Sounds
for.
Like a great idea. Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, if you guys like the idea of a book club, lovely listener, let us know in the comments somewhere, and maybe we'll put something together for you guys. Book recs, recommendation lists, et cetera. That'd be fun. If you got some value out of the episode, let us know. That always makes us feel warm and fuzzy and gives us the motivation we need to continue doing this for you lovely souls. But yeah, appreciate the insights on the hiring stuff, guys. There's some good stuff. We will make this a continued series because I think there's so many lessons over the years. I'm chomping at the bit to add more to this list because there's some just like I think some really great stories and insight that can do what I think our goal is, right? Which is helping the folks that are listening avoid the show that we all had to go through, right? Or at least to navigate the show with a little bit more certainty and clarity and a little bit lower blood pressure. So love hugs. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Adios.